Here we are. Whoa. Let me get here. Week 9, day 17. Friday the 26th. Access, layer, and then make sure you're working on the curriculum. It's a busy slide. Anyway, let's talk about this. First thing, inside a router, we talked about ANDing. What happens is you might have an address like this. The router ANDs it with the mask, and then what results is the network part of the address. And then this can be used to find the correct port in the router to send the traffic out. So it looks in the routing table. It gets a little more complicated as we move on, but for right now, that's what you can think of. So it takes the network part of the address, looks in the routing table to find a match, which will give it a port to queue up and send the information out. So it's the network layer, and we're looking at the path. Okay? So up here was an example. I circled the area network layer. And then this routing device will do that. It'll look. This was the scenario we had in class. So we had 3 switches that the students, 3 different groups, had PCs connected to their switches. And we talked about how the traffic left there and, for example, headed out to the internet. Right? So there's a default gateway right in here that this PC couldn't, if it's going somewhere, let's say out here on the internet, it's not going to find that IP on its local network when it does an ARP. Remember? Address resolution protocol. So it does a broadcast, tries to find the address here. It looks, all these computers on that switch see it. None of them respond, so then it uses the default gateway and gets the MAC address to send it up here to this multi-layered switch. So then the traffic goes to the switch, and the switch looks at the IPs, and it looks to route them, like we talked about down here. Doesn't have any of those addresses here on its network, either this way or this way. So what it does, it uses its default gateway and sends it up to this router. Now that router does network address translation right here, and it converts the local address coming in to an address that matches the network that we're currently using. So it takes these 192, 168s, dot whatever, and it NATs them to an address in this network, 172.20.1. something. Okay? We'll learn more about that later, but they're translated, and then it keeps track of them based on a port number. I better write that in black up here, which we'll look at here in just a minute. And then in reality, if we keep following it goes into this network, it gets NATed again by the firewall to a public address and goes out into the internet. So it actually gets NATed twice. It's out the internet forwards it, and then let's use a different color coming back, so then it's coming back, right? the internet uses IP from our ISP, so it sends it back to our ISP. Our ISP sends it to NIAC. NIAC looks at the address. Is it the main campus or is it this way? Does the same thing we talked about down here. Okay, I'm going to make this line look a little different. So it realizes it's on the IT network, and it comes in here, and this does NAT again, changes it back to private address, and here, believe it or not, does NAT again, changes it back to 192.168, comes in here, gets routed. Again, I'm down here on the bottom of the slide, gets routed in the routing table, it ANDs it and goes through the process, realizes that it's on this network, sends it to the switch, and when it sends it out, right, there's an ARP table, puts a MAC address on it, hits the switch, has a MAC address, comes down to the PC. That's how it works. Key things, we need to identify what's the network, what's the host or interface. When we use IP6, we'll be talking about interfaces. Let's go to the next slide. We good? Yeah. Right? We divide these up there in different networks. This was a 10 network. This was an 8 network. This was a 2 network. 2 network here. You notice how all those networks are different? These are on the same switch. Right here. Talked again about the layers. I am not going to repeat that. Network layer, IP4, or, right, as we move forward, it'll be IP version 6, 128 bits versus 32 bits. Data link layer, usually Ethernet, and the physical layer. What do we use to put it on the wire? Public and private addressing. Private addressing, if you're going to the internet, you get a public address. Sometimes public addresses are often, not sometimes, often referred to as global addresses. So, how it keeps track, that 122 address I was talking about, that 172.21, and then some here. So this was the address internally. We were converting our addresses. For example, here's a 10, and this is where it's going out on the internet. Right? Those destination address. And so how it keeps track of it is it has a port number. So when it leaves, goes out the internet. Let me use here some marker. So when it leaves and it goes out to the internet, or onto the next network, then when it comes back, it's coming back from this address, and then it can use the port number to switch it back to the internal address. Yeah, that's how it works. And this is a routing table, so in this is a routing table in that multi-layered switch. You know, everybody was connected to. Right, it's a router and a switch, so we had these different networks connected. So, for example, the one of them was the 8 network. So, where was it? The 8 network, I don't know, somewhere's over here maybe. So, this is the port. So, when it gets something coming back from the internet, let's say, and gets translated and gets back to the address, it looks at the address here and it says, well, that belongs on this network, so it sends it out this port. When it leaves that port, it can match up the IP with the MAC address, so then when it hits the multi-layered switch, it goes right to the right device. Oh, FYI, this is an email the other day when we had the other evening when they had an issue with the losing access here on campus. We had this huge surge using the bandwidth going out to the internet, which then created a denial of service. It wasn't intentional, but it creates that denial of service where all of a sudden people can't use services just because there's so much being done. And that was around 10, 11 o'clock that Tuesday or whatever when it was. Midnight. Alright, one more slide. Yeah, here's another one just emphasizing the routing table. Here's the gateway of last resort. This is actually the router sitting outside the multi-layered switch. So that's two basic directions. It can send stuff out fast Ethernet 00, which is heading towards the other network, or it can send all of these